Here is a new recording that I've just made on the Unit 1 discussion because I want to explain it a little more clearly. I'm not sure that the video that I had posted earlier is quite clear enough. But let's try to make this as simple as possible. First of all, you're going to be reading this article by Katherine Walbert because you're going to try to act like an historian and investigate primary sources the way historians do. So first of all, you have to understand what those methods of investigation are, and then you need to put one of them to use. So if you read this article, you open it up, it's by Katherine Walbert again, and you can enlarge it with the tools up at the top of the screen. This will tell you what a primary source is and what a secondary source is. And when you get down here, you start to get to the themes as I describe them. There are 5 themes. First is identify the source, and then she talks about how you do that. And second, contextualize the source. That's another theme. And then she explains how you do that, what that means and how you do it. And then explore the source, what that means and how you do that. Analyze the source, and then what does that mean and how do you do that? And then finally, the same with evaluate the source. What does that mean and how do you do it? Now, you have to pick one of these 5 themes, and you have to do what it says you do for that theme in the case of the article to which you have been assigned in this assignment. So that's pretty straightforward. But for example, when you look at identify the source, I'm just going to use this as an example. It has to do with what is the nature of the source, and she explains that, who created it, and what do we know about this person who created the source. What do we know about the time period in which the source was produced? We'll have to know something about that. And where was the source produced? Because depending upon where it was produced, you can make some judgment about the point of view of the author. So all of those things have to do with identifying the source. And so it's not just a matter of saying, oh, I know the name of the person who identified the source. You have to understand who this person is and what they were like. What do we know about them? What do we know about their ideas? So let's suppose you wanted to use that theme to analyze, let's say, the source on the Aztecs. Now, you may not have been assigned to that article, and so you can't do it if you haven't been assigned to it. But let's suppose you were assigned to it. And let's take a look at that document and see what we can make of it. Now we are back at the instructions for the assignment. So we will go down, and let's suppose we've already read the reading primary sources, and let's suppose that our last name begins with A through H, so we have to analyze this source. So then, of course, we click on the source, and there it is. Now, this source happens to be very, very short, and you might say, well, that's so much better than the Columbus source because that's more lengthy. Well, now, wait a minute. That is not necessarily the case. So what you have, first of all, is you have a paragraph that is written by the authors of your textbook. This sentence here is not a primary source. It's a secondary source introduction by the secondary source author, the author of your textbook, who's still alive today. It's not written at the time of the Aztecs. Okay, so here we say, said Quetzalcoatl to the sovereign, and so on. O mighty Lord, if because I tell you the truth I am to die, nevertheless I am here in your presence, and you may do what you wish to me. He narrated the mountain men would come to this land in a great wooden house, ships, This structure was to lodge many men, serving them as a home. Within they would eat and sleep. On the surface of this house they would cook their food, walk and play as if they were on firm land. They were to be white, bearded men, dressed in different colors, and on their heads they would wear round coverings. All right, so then the next thing that is said is also written by the authors of your textbook. And so the only part of this which is a primary source is this middle section. But let's see what the authors say at the end. 10 years before the arrival of the Spanish, Moctezuma received several omens which at the time he could not interpret. A fiery object appeared in the night sky, a spontaneous fire broke out in a religious temple and could not be extinguished with water. A water spout appeared in Lake Texcoco, and a woman could be heard wailing, "Oh, my children, we are about to go forever." Moctezuma also had dreams and premonitions of impending disaster. These foretellings were recorded after the Aztecs' destruction. They do, however, give us insight into the importance placed upon signs and omens in the pre-Columbian world. Now, as you recall, when we were in the Walbert source, we saw that she identifying the source as answering these questions. What is the nature of the source? Who created the source? What do I know about him or her? When was the source produced? Where was the source produced? So, what, who, when, and where. Now, can we tell that information from the document? Let's go back to it. Here it is again. And let's enlarge it a little bit so we can read it better. Here it is. Okay, so this says it's an excerpt from a 16th century Florentine codex of the writings of Fray Bernardino de Sahagun, a priest and early chronicler of Aztec history. So this statement is something that is produced by a Spaniard, specifically a priest. This is not necessarily the words of Quetzalcoatl to the sovereign. It's what this guy, Fray Bernardino de Sahagun, says Quetzalcoatl said to the sovereign. So the question is this document a primary source written by the Aztecs or a primary source written by the Spanish? Now, I would say it's a primary source written by the Spanish. So, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that it was in the 16th century. It was written by this priest who was a Spaniard talking about the Aztecs. And he is supposedly conveying a myth that the Aztecs actually believed in. Now, what does this tell us about the Aztecs? Well, it doesn't really tell us anything about the Aztecs, because this could be something that Sahagun made up. He certainly believed in it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the Aztecs actually said this. We can't tell. It doesn't come from the Aztecs. It comes from the Spaniards, and specifically this person, Fray Bernardino de Sahagun. So it says it's from the 16th century. You might want to do some research on the web to see exactly when in the 16th century, and remember that's in the 1500s. And so where was this guy? Well, I don't know. You'll have to do some research on Fray Bernardino. Did he live in the New World, or did he live in the Old World? Where was he writing this? So that's the where part. The why part is, again, if you research something about this guy on the web, you might find what his attitude was towards the Aztecs. Was he opposed to them? Did he hate them? Did he want to protect them? Was he a good historian? Was this an accurate statement? And why was he presenting it? Even if it was accurate or was not accurate, what was his motive for saying this? In order to determine that, you have to determine when he wrote this, why he wrote this, where he wrote this, and what can we tell from that. So you'll have to do some research on finding out what this guy was like. What were his politics? That is, what was his point of view regarding the Aztecs? Did he want to destroy the Aztecs, or did he want to protect them? So I would concentrate on this guy and not Quetzalcoatl, because we cannot be sure that this document is actually a document from the Aztecs. It is supposedly from the Aztecs, but that's simply what this man said. All right, so you can see you can't just write this up based on this document. You have to do some searching around on the web. I hope that helps you with this assignment.